right. I am HO Talk Show. Thank you guys for staying tuned. We're here for you. Still doing this during this COVID response.
Is that what we're doing?
I mean, we're in phase one, and then we're also here for you because we're dealing, once again, back in the forefront of our news, even during the pandemic, is that of the black community and police relations. The killings of unarmed black folk and the issues of police brutality that still plagues our nation. And man, being black, like I say, it's like a precondition, man. It's like we can't escape it no matter what we're going through, no matter what the news is. There's something that's disproportionately affecting us. And we have to be real about it. It's the only way we're going to get to the core and to the cure, right? So that's why it brings us much pleasure right now. It's Charles, it's Miss Max, it's Aaron, and we are joined by the police chief of your city of Charlottesville, Virginia, Chief RaShall Brackney. Chief, how are you today, ma'am?
So, you know what, I'm good, as well as can be expected for any one of us under these conditions. So
Yes.
Thank you for this platform. As I can imagine, myself, my husband, and most black community has not slept in days. Part of it is, as I think about and reflect upon it, the black community is always facing some predatory pandemic. And COVID-19 is attacking us in one particular way, but it's no more than a variant of all the diseases that we face that are very predatory. Whether it's police violence, criminal justice systems that are unjust, economic disparities, educational disparities, housing disparities. It always seems like there's another reiteration of a pandemic that we have to fight that is evolving much faster than our responses to it.
Yes, absolutely right. So, before we go any further, though, we like doing wellness checks because, it's important for us to look out for each other. So you as a black woman, black female, black husband, when you see this news, if you ever can remove yourself from the uniform, that may not be possible. I know for a lot of people who are hard workers, that's impossible for them. But just as black female, black family, when you see that, how are you coping?
So you know what, it really is stressful for most of us, right? And feeling very conflicted and trying to find a sense of peace and self-care. Yesterday was a really tough day. As a matter of fact, just in full transparency and honesty, I sat in my driveway and had to call our pastor and say, I can't move from this space.
I understand.
Could not move, could not turn the car on, could not, manage what I was feeling, and knew that I needed something higher than my own will and determination to get out of the driveway and to go into work, to say, what is it that I could do under the direction and power of the God that I serve, to see what I could do to make a difference, right? Because this is a very sick land that we are in, and it is in need of healing and just self-care, understanding we need to put down our arrogance. We can't do this all by ourselves, right?
That's
and
right.
to think that we can is arrogant and prideful.
Yeah, that is spot on. Max?
Well, Chief, I want to ask you a question, and feel free to tell me whether or not you can or can't answer it. But I just wonder, when things like this happen, how is that handled within a police department, especially with you being at the helm? Do you call your people together and talk about this, get feelings out there, give them some direction as far as, how to deal with the public, what's the appropriate force and inappropriate force? Like, how does that go on behind the scenes?
Absolutely. So I meet with my team all the time. We meet every Tuesday to discuss these type of issues. And I won't tell you which one of my supervisors texted me last night, but after our team meeting yesterday, which I read to the team the statement that I was released on George Floyd and the blood stain on our badges based on the behaviors of the officers, the murder that we all witnessed live, like the many murders that we've witnessed. It seeps into your brain, and then we had to talk about what does that what does that look like and feel like in this community where there is such a distrust and there's such pain, residual pain around police interactions, not only over the last few years, but for decades and centuries now, where there's always, there seems to be a connection with law enforcement, with police professionals, and how we police certain communities. And we have those hard conversations. And then Max, the one thing I would say is, I'm getting a lot of emails from constituents, and the questions they keep asking, what does your de-escalation training look like? What does that conversations look like around bias-based policing? What might we look for when we think about books like Blind Spot, where you have these blind spots where you can't see yourself or things for how they are? And unfortunately, in this society, we want to take comfort in the fact that people have training. But if that's the only thing that it is it means that we have training that just makes us feel better. You can't train away racism. You can't train away bias. I don't care what anyone says about these concepts. The real work comes in procedural and restorative justice processes where you are fully immersed and invested in the process of healing. And I can't even say reconciliation because we've never been reconciled. Can't say reparations because there's never been a relationship to repair. So, we have the very hard, difficult conversations, but I just don't want the community to think that, or to assuage their concerns that there's this training that can help us through what we witnessed in Minnesota, in Ferguson, when Trayvon, Tamir, you name it.
Yes.
You can't train away the dehumanization of Black bodies and lives.
And she actually rolled perfectly into what I was going to bring up, is that I use a term, ma'am, that I call race soldiers, because I don't believe that these people are law enforcement. Because even when I see people say things like, "Oh, the police are bad," I think that term or the metaphor you use as the blood stain, that's inaccurate. People take an oath to protect and serve. These gentlemen or young men or young women or whoever, the oath that they're taking is not the same oath that they're supposed to be having. So I don't even consider them law enforcement. My first question for you is that if we do have what I call suspected race soldiers, what the vetting process, how are we going to figure out ways, like you said, to vet these people, to prevent some of these things from happening? And then also, if you can even answer that question, I wanted to ask you something secondary about the tactical response that I've seen from police departments around the country. But I wanted to ask the first question first about the vetting process and some things that you guys are trying to do.
So, you know what? I agree there needs to be vetting, and there are these tests that you can take around cultural competencies, right, that indicate or indicators of bias. But you know what the real test is? The real test is the culture and what is condoned within the culture, right? When you see 3 other police officers participating in, so there's either a culture where these types of behavior are accepted, or there's a culture of fear that is created when officers come forward to say we see a problem, that there is a dismissal of that, an alienation of those persons, where the quote unquote whistleblower is not feeling protected. And that is a current climate that we're facing from the highest administration, that when someone comes forth and they're saying at the top of their lungs, this is wrong, we actually make them the criminal. And we criminalize courageous, ethical behavior, not only, within often law enforcement, but also in the administration. And I say to our officers every single day, you can't expect from the community what we don't hold ourselves to.
Absolutely.
You can't expect that we will police, that the community polices itself if we don't do it. And that's a cultural shift.
Absolutely. My second question was, I was watching, I'm sure last night, I'm not sure if you under a rock for the people out there under a rock. But if you turned on your television, you definitely saw some burning. You saw some looting. You saw protesting and things of that nature. One of the more interesting things that I did see, and my lady pointed this out, and she said, I see a lot of restraint from law enforcement. The engagement felt different. And the one thing that we talk about, Charles, Max, and I, we always talk about that history repeats itself. And I was very impressed. I don't even know if impressed is the word, but I don't even know if happy is the word, Charles. But what I saw last night was, I remember that Edward Pettus bridge, about those people walking over that bridge and they protest. And then America, or the concept of America, saw those peaceful protesters be terrorized and get the brakes beat off them. I'm just going to use that metaphor. I did not see that last night anywhere. I saw a little. I might have seen, but I didn't see that. And and there was an interview that they did with, I believe, a councilman in Minneapolis, and they said specifically, there's a feeling that the city would let the buildings burn, and that they would let structures burn, but they did not want to see that engagement that we have seen in the 60s and seen in the 70s between law enforcement and protesters. I mean, people, some of us are maybe too young, but people don't remember Kent State and during the Vietnam War. And I just wanted to ask you, is that something that you guys have discussed, even just among officers, the climate of what we feel? It almost felt like the officers, and this is just from a spirit, they felt what I was feeling when I'm watching them. They don't want to engage in this. They don't even really want to be here.
Now, what cities are you referring to?
Houston, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Minneapolis as well. Brooklyn was a little bit more aggressive, but I'm sorry, I was talking too much. But
Sacramento, I mean, it was all across the nation. So thank you for that question. If you remember the last time I was on, we talked about the concept of protest. And I expressed that one of my dear friends years ago is a professor and, a brother in Christ from Pittsburgh, Professor Jonathan White. And he was talking about the concept of protest, right? And he said protest is the most powerful expression of powerlessness, right? And to get out. And I want to reframe that we don't call it protest, because it does have a lot of those negative connotations to it, as though you don't have a right to be out there. They are engaging in civil discourse. Right. That is exactly what is supposed to be occurring, right? That is what we fought for, quote unquote, when we, succeeded from Britain, right? That we would have the ability for the freedom of expression. So you're exactly right. There is an understanding. And I know our officers don't want to be out there in the middle of this. And I have very intentional conversations about how do we engage. If you remember, over the last couple of years since we've been here and we've had to revisit the events of 2017, my message over and over and over again is, it's a soft presence. You allow people the ability to express themselves in a healthy way, because there's no other way. And what I often want to talk about too is, because you will get a lot of groups pushing back about, hey, why are they burning down buildings in their own communities? This makes no sense. And this is something that, is harming their own community. I do not advocate burning down anybody's building, but I can see the pain, right? And then you can also see where you have access to. If I'm in LA, I don't have access to Bel Air to burn Bel Air down or Beverly Hills. And you can guarantee that there's going to be some government structure that guarantees that doesn't happen. So the first access you have is your immediate access.
That's right.
And it's not like you have access to vent in other ways. So you're exactly right. We are looking at this different, that people should have the ability to demonstrate and engage in discourse in a way that protects them, their assemblies, just like everyone else wants their other rights protected as well.
Absolutely.
And so I have to ask, for you to address before we let you go, the citizen that's here in Charlottesville, because as we see something that someone in one city, someone in Charlottesville is looking at Minneapolis, right? And they're far away. It's kind of like the analogy you just made of whatever you have access to, right? But people all around the world are so upset by what they're seeing in another city that they are taking it out in their own city because they feel like that the root cause is that there's this like infrastructure, that there's this systematic oppression, behind the badge, like behind the uniform, like the Blue Lives Matter kind of thing. Like people get offended by that. So, you as a police chief, if someone in Charlottesville is looking at that and they're thinking, like police are police, they're not doing anything about this, like they're not speaking out on one another, like you as the chief, how do you address that person?
So, you know what, I can see and understand and feel their frustration. But also what I also ask is get engaged and get involved in the long haul. When I say to people all the time, yeah, we should shut down I-95, but we should also shut down every voting booth too. That we're in line and we are literally burning up those voting booths. When you have somebody like Attorney Generals Sessions and Barr, who gut the Justice Department and the Civil Rights Divisions and say, we don't want any police oversight, you should be shutting down those booths. Right. And you need to look at people who are aligned with your values, not just for the news cycle or the voting cycle. Look at their history. I don't have to explain to anybody, and I will not explain to any liberal here who wants to be a keyboard warrior about my commitment to the Black community because I'm wearing a uniform. You know what? I stay in this profession because that's how I change this profession. I have decades under my belt, and I will look each of those persons in the face and say, what is it they're doing? Look at my long history, but be willing to put yourself on the line too and work with me. Don't be, like I said, a keyboard warrior and take pot shots at a system in which you're not willing to put your body on that, because I'm putting mine on the front line every single day.
Chief, can I ask you a question before we let you go? I just want to hear, as a fellow police officer and chief, I wondered if you could just give your thoughts on what you think is a justified or valid punishment for these officers, the bystanding officers, the officer that actually took Floyd's life. I don't think that they should just be allowed to collect pay. I don't think they should be allowed to roll over to another police department. And I think that some of them need to be charged with murder, no different than a criminal on the street.
So, you know what, Max? Let me just walk through literally what I was saying. Do you know why they burned down the streets yesterday? You had an attorney, the prosecuting attorney, do what they always do, set up the exit strategy or the exoneration strategy for these officers.
That's right.
He comes on and says, we have contradictory evidence to this case. And so the things that I can see through my eyes are lying to me, right? And then we come out with a soft charge of manslaughter versus charging the highest ranks and then have the lesser included charges in case there is an opportunity for some juror to then overturn it. But when you charge at the lowest level, you then can actually walk through and exonerate. And if you look at these cases, the majority of officers are exonerated or if ever brought to charge at all. I believe that we saw a murder in front of our faces. We saw an execution in front of our faces. And if we quickly were able to bring George Floyd into custody and had deemed that he was to be arrested over a forfeit or counterfeit $20 bill, if we had the probable cause to arrest him at the highest level for forgery, not even to bring him in to ask him questions about where he obtained the bill, how had he possibly done it. If we could do that, don't talk to me about what we can't charge or how quickly we can charge, including the other officers. And the rules, the laws are really clear on this, Max. It says that if other officers act or even fail to act to intervene, they are held to the same standard as the officer who is committing the act. No more than,
and should be.
That's right. And no less justifiable than the rules that say, which we're attempting to overturn, if you're in a car with somebody and they commit a bank robbery and you're the
That's right.
driver and they're the one who commits the robbery and they commit the homicide, they charge you too, right?
Yep.
That is the rule. You are charged at the same level as the person who actually did the act. That should not be the exclusion for these officers.
Absolutely.
And Charles, that is what we call Black self-respect.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Max, kick it to you. I think. Did we lose her?
Max?
Max is still on mute.
That's all right. Well, this Zoom thing, you know how it goes. Technology be technology. But Chief, I want to thank you. Aaron,
I'm
did you
here.
have anything else for the
I'm
Chief?
I
I was
just
talking away too.
Oh, you was? Oh, wait. Max was having a whole conversation back there. No, I appreciate. I always appreciate to hear Black people that are in positions that have an opportunity to make change or to just speak about their experiences, be very upfront and honest about their experience. And I just want to tell the young lady, I appreciate her transparency, safety and prayers for her husband, her family members. And it's definitely just something we can solve this problem. And I think with people like her, it makes it a lot more palatable and we should all be encouraged if we have leadership like this.
That's right. And before I kick it to you, Max, to close out, Chief, thank you as always. And yeah, I echo what Aaron is saying because it's so crucial, for you. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of President Obama, right? On how he, was unapologetically a Black man, but realized that he's the president of the United States. He wasn't the president of just Black America, but he tried to carry himself in a way to where he didn't lose sight of either one. And so that's one thing that I really appreciate about you as well. And I agree with you when you made the mention of the voting booths, because as we see, even in Minneapolis, you have, a mayor that's at complete odds with the DA. And the mayor is trying to do what's right and trying to clean things up, and the DA is kind of being, status quo. And so that goes to show that the power is still in their vote in a lot of cases, and this is one. So, Max?
Yeah. And
That's right. And if you even just looked at interviews today with Amy Klobuchar, the senator there, and is now calling for patterns and practices for the Department of Justice to look at in Minneapolis. What was she doing, right? And then she may be a contender for our vice president. We need to shut those booths down and make sure that Joe Biden picks the person that needs to be by his side. And again, the Democratic Party needs to show up for Black folks like Black showed up for the Democratic forever. Hashtag Stacey Abrams, Val Demings. That's just me.
Say so.
That's right.
I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to call the police chief gangster, but
she threw some Black woman magic in there too at the end. She threw some of that pixie dust on there. She said, "Gotta give it up for my sisters." I ain't mad at that.
But yeah, Chief, I definitely echo the sentiments that's expressed by Aaron and Charles. And I just want to thank you for not losing sight, as Charles says. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Stay healthy, stay safe. In my humble opinion, this team rocks. You all just got it together, and I am just honored every single time I come here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
See you soon.
Stay safe.